Have you ever wondered about the birthplace of democracy? Then set your sights on Athens, Greece. This bustling metropolis is a city that breathes history. From its ancient ruins like the Acropolis to its world-class museums, Athens is a living time capsule taking you back to the days of Socrates and Plato. But Athens isn't just stuck in the past. It's a modern city with delicious food, vibrant nightlife, and friendly locals. So get ready for a journey through time. Athens awaits. And ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I have two special guests. For the first time, we have two guests that are going to talk about Athens, Greece. And we have Steve Gantzos and Ken Cook. And I'll go over both Steve and Ken's bios. Steve Gantzos is a Greek American currently living in Athens, running a business as a real estate broker, serving foreign and Greek clients to find their dream home in Greece. You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Steve's the guy. Born in ancient Roman town of Esslingen, Germany, given by the Byzantine name of See, now this is not good because Stylianos, you help me out there.
This is why I changed my name to Steve. It's Stylianos.
Stylianos, belonging to the
Sorry.
No,
I'm just going to say it's the male version of Stella.
Okay, Stella. Belonging to his late grandfather, the family moved to the U.S. in later months of 1969, settling in the Philadelphia area, where his mother's family settled years before and had established themselves in the Greek community of Upper Darby, a suburb of the city. As was the norm in the Greek community in the early 70s, the family steadfastly clung to traditions and the language where Steve grew up, speaking Greek as his first language, while enjoying the rich cultural background of his family and ancestors. Greek was the only language he spoke until entering grade school, where the challenge of learning English in school turned to both a daunting and exciting task for a young child whose parents depended on his language skills and at later stages in life. Steve spent most of his life living in the Philadelphia area. Then a career opportunity took him to Miami, where he spent 12 years in the tropical sun, enjoying the gentrification of the region in the mid-90s. Realizing his heart was always in Europe after numerous visits, he ventured into the process of successfully obtaining ancestral citizenship in Greece to initiate the dream of living in his continent of birth. Yet the dream took many years to come to fruition. We'll find out why, too. At the peak of the pandemic and the realization that life is much too short, I'm thinking about that right now, the dream to live and work in Europe became reality with the move to Greece in early January of 2021. Steve spends much of his time enjoying the richness of his ancestral land, traveling for business and pleasure to places he learned of in his youth, and making wonderful friends along the way while enjoying the remarkable adventure that is life today in Greece. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And we'll tell you a little bit about Ken Cook. Ken first set foot in Greece in 1987, an experience that ignited a lasting passion for the country's stunning landscapes, ancient heritage, and dynamic lifestyle. His bond with Greece was further cemented in 2017 when he purchased his first apartment in Athens, and again in 2022 with his second property, a penthouse acclaimed for its spectacular Acropolis view, featured in the New York Times The Hunt on February 19th, 2023. Ken's personal journey in Greece has been enriched by his partnership with his Greek spouse. Together for 15 years and married for 8, their shared life is a testament to the beauty in cultural fashion and mutual growth. This intimate connection to Greece and its people have profoundly influenced Ken's perspective, infusing Greek life getaway with authenticity and depth. So, Ken, you'll have to tell us about Greek Life Getaway as well, your book, and welcome to the podcast, both of you.
Thank you. Appreciate being
Thank
here.
you, Mark.
Oh, my pleasure. So, and it's an honor to have you both, that podcast. So, tell us, I'd like to hear this from both of you. Why did you choose Athens as a city in Greece to move to, both, from the United States? We know that, Ken, you're snowbirding now, correct?
Correct.
You're half the time in Miami?
Correct. Half the time in Miami, half the time in Athens. So
Okay. And Steve, you made the plunge and you are full time now in Athens. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Steve, tell us a little bit about your journey and why you chose Athens as a city in Greece of all the other cities or places in Greece.
Sure. Athens is the capital, and it's the largest city in all of Greece. About half of the population in Greece lives here. We do have quite a few other cities as well, like Thessaloniki, Yanina, Patra. But Athens has pretty much everything that any big city can offer. Years ago, when I first visited Athens in 1986, I was, kind of culture shocked. I mean, everything was in Greek and everything was Greek. But over the years of traveling here, the entire environment has changed. A lot of people who are Athenian have traveled outside of the country, lived in different places within Europe or even the States, and brought back just new ideas and concepts. And we have a lot of very interesting cultural mixes here from different parts of the world. So we're almost like a mini New York, if you will, where you can find almost anything that you want as far as cuisines, even food at different markets, imported from all sorts of countries. And it really fit for me, coming from big cities and having, visited New York City quite often in my past. I wanted someplace that would really fit well, but also give me a lot of great options for traveling outside of the city, which I do either by car or by ferry, or of course by plane if I wanted to leave the country or within the country for that matter. So it just really has everything that you need to live a great life. For me, it was one of the features to be a part of a chorus. So I actually was part of two choruses over the last few years. And that is a big part of the experience here in Athens as well, the cultural diversity, especially in music and the arts, which are a big thing here. So it really fit well for me. Yeah, it's nice.
It resonates with me from being from New York. I mean, it sounds like a perfect place, for a New Yorker to kind of settle to.
In many ways it is. It's not nearly the scale of New York or the scale of London, but I would say it's closer to the scale of like Philadelphia or Miami. And, having lived in both places for many years, I can honestly say that we have a very good mix of activities and cultures and people and languages and housing. Just there's something to do every day.
Okay, so Ken, tell us your journey and how you got yourself to Athens.
Okay, my first trip to Athens was in 1987. I was in the Marine Corps back then, and we got to spend 2 weeks there. And I went around the city and around the outskirts of Athens, down to the port, to the beach, and I fell in love with it. It was just a very welcoming city at the time. So then fast forward to 2013 was my second trip to Athens. But that trip I took with my spouse, Nick, at the time, was not my spouse. We were just dating. And he's a Greek American. So we talked about, where we would love to retire there, blah, blah, blah. And so we started going back and forth from 2013. Then we went back in 2015. And since 2015, we averaged going 2 or 3 times a year to Greece. His family's originally from the Peloponnese, but just as Steve alluded to earlier, and I think I told you before, Athens is a mini New York. You don't need a car. You have all the public transportation you need. You have the arts, the entertainment. At one point, we'll get to it. There are 31 recognized Michelin restaurants within Athens. There's 1 2-star and 11 1-star restaurants, plus the other ones that they recognize as well. The food is amazing. The people's amazing. You just feel right at home. It's very welcoming. Everybody's friendly. And healthcare wise, we picked Athens because you have three major hospitals in town, two private, one public. And so you can, anything you want to do, you can get there. You can get, it's just that simple.
It sounds great. So, Steve, tell us, geographically speaking, where is Athens located within Greece?
Sure. We're at the southern sort of middle point of the country. Greece, I would say, is close to the size of Florida, perhaps, if you will, but, kind of spread out in a very different way with lots of islands and peninsulas. So we're in the peninsula that's called Attiki, and it has the geography here is sort of like a basin where we're surrounded by mountains around the city. And that just creates an interesting landscape, but there's a lot of variety for building, having, developed over the years. In terms of weather, we're a pretty mild climate. Like this past winter was extremely mild. We pretty much didn't get into even the 40s at night.
Wow.
And during the day, we were kind of consistently in the 60s. Years prior, it was a little bit colder. We had some snow, but that lasted for like a day or two. It was fun to experience. But overall, we're very mild throughout the winter. And the last few weeks, we've been in the 70s. It's been quite nice. So now if you go to the northern part of the country, you get into a much colder climate, a more proper four seasons experience. And so there's a lot more snow, a lot more, temperatures dipping below zero. And so, it's quite a varied climate. If we're looking at the Peloponnese, which I normally would refer to as Peloponnesos, the proper way of speaking it, it's even warmer than the peninsula of where Athens is, the Attiki Peninsula. And the island of Crete is the warmest throughout the year. And people in the southern portion along the Libyan Sea will find that they can actually swim probably well into November and December. But we also see that here in the Attiki region around the Athens metro area where people are swimming around our oceans, our sea, pretty much all year round without any wetsuit. Yeah. Yeah. I
And
won't
the
do
climate,
it, but they do.
and the climate, Mediterranean climate, is an ideal climate,
It's
especially.
lovely. We have a lot of sunshine here, which I really appreciate. It was one of the reasons why I moved to Florida because I needed more sun in my life. But when I experienced Florida that first year, I nearly died of that humidity. And we don't have
Surprise.
any of that humidity experience here in Attiki and Athens. It's very rare to get into like the 80% humidity like it is in the tropics. So we're kind of like a nice, even keel for humidity levels and moisture.
And Ken, how about yourself? Is the climate a factor, one of the factors of moving to Athens?
Most definitely. It's typically an arid, climate, but over the years it is getting a little bit more humid because of climate change, but not to the point anything like Florida. I can walk the city in any month in August or July. Yeah, I'll sweat, but it's not, you don't die from being out there. And, it's just a very nice city to walk, to live in. Where it's located, it is in the southern part of the country, of the mainland. And there are, a little over 10 million people here, of which 3 million or more live in the Athens metropolitan area.
It's a
And
big city.
yeah, and it is, like Steve alluded to earlier, it's got three mountains around it. It's like they call it the bowl. You have the mountains around you and then the sea. So three sides mountains, one side sea.
Oh, you have like the best of everything.
You do.
Yeah.
It has both. When I lived in Florida, I had the ocean, and then now living in Phoenix, I have the mountains, but I don't have both. And you guys have both.
Yes.
We do. Yeah, it's
That's
pretty
great.
striking. Yeah.
That's great. So, and we'll take the next question and we'll ask both of you. So, Steve first, is living in an LGBTQ community important to you? Does Athens have like a gayborhood, so to speak? And are there gay bars and gay life in Athens at all?
Yes, definitely. It was important to me, and I knew that Athens has a very strong presence for the LGBTQ community. We have Pride festivals in June, a Pride parade. We have some pre-Pride parties that started recently. The region, the neighborhood called Gazi is let's say, the core, the neighborhood of Athens overall. So you'll find, a good mix of a variety of bars for whether it's for the men, the women, and everybody, who's identifying as queer. We also have a couple places that are extremely gay friendly, or I shouldn't say a couple, many places. In fact, you can pretty much go to almost all of the places that are in the historic district and no one's going to bat an eye. My favorite spot is called the Rooster on St. Irene Square. So that's a cool spot and just a nice relaxed area. And yeah, it's not a cruisy place, but it's a good spot for me. And that's directly in the heart of the historic district. Gazi, it's a little bit further away from the main historic district, but it's also a historic area, if you will, at the edge of where the ancient artifacts are located. And it was once the location for where they refined natural gas. And it turned into, a place that got gentrified. So that was important to me, yes, to be in a community of gay people, whether it was the Greek community, but also we have a huge expat community of LGBTQ. And there's always something going on. The nightlife is a little bit European, if you will. It starts very late, which, for some of us is not that ideal.
When I'm asleep.
We're asleep, yeah. So, you see, Philadelphia, they had last call like 1:30 and 2 o'clock, everything closed. Here, you're lucky if you find people in a bar or nightclub at midnight. And it's not unusual for things to stay open until 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning.
The first arriving at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. The one thing that I do miss, however, for me is a gay men's chorus. And I was a participant of the Miami Gay Men's Chorus and the Philadelphia Gay Men's Chorus. And unfortunately, we don't have that yet. So we'll see where, that might go over the years.
But you said you're part of the chorus, so it's just a chorus.
Yes, I'm a part of 2 choruses, and the one is like a stem off the National Opera. The other one is more of a community chorus. The first one I mentioned is a multicultural chorus experience with people from different parts of the world, basically. And we sing a variety of, let's say, folk songs from different countries. So we're singing in a variety of languages. Whereas the other choir is a little bit more of the, let's say, traditional Greek songs and a variety of, let's say, Latin-based classical pieces like Mozart and Bach and different things like that. So it's a nice experience, and there are some gay members in each, which is very nice. And, everyone has been very supportive and gay-friendly, of course. Never had any incidents, and it's, people are aware. And even the government, I would say is very gay friendly. The prior administration and the current administration are very supportive of the gay community. The Orthodox Church, maybe not so much, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
As it is, as it possibly should be, I guess. I don't know.
How about you, Ken? Does living in an LGBTQ community, is that important to you, or?
It's important, but my main thing was we wanted to find an area that was vibrant, but very welcoming, open-minded. And my metro stop it's 3 stops away from Gazi, where Steve was talking about. I mean, so I can jump on. The only problem is the metro stops at midnight, and they don't start until after midnight. So you'll have to taxi back, but it's like 8 to 10 euros to get back to my apartment. It's not bad. So that's important. And no matter where you go in Athens, they are welcoming. It's like I have never had an incident where anybody said anything or, no matter where you go, you see gay people. The restaurant or coffee shop that Steve mentioned in the heart of town, if you go to that coffee shop and you sit down, you may not even realize it's a gay ran or gay themed coffee shop, because there is as many straight people sitting there as there are gay people. And that's the way it is there. Everybody intermixes. Everybody is comfortable with the mixing, and it's just amazing the way
It's not even a big deal. So,
no.
here in the States, of course, it may be a little bit more important to have a gayborhood or gay bars because there is some stigma in the United States. Whereas I feel where whoever I speak with in Europe, it's more laid back and it's like, it's not a factor. It's like
No.
people, they don't care, you know?
Yes, one thing that I would mention, Steve mentioning gay pride. Last year I was there in Athens for gay pride. There were more families. There, let me put it this way: there was as many families at gay pride as there were gay folks at gay pride, and they were participating. They had their flags. They were watching. It is amazing to be there to see it compared to a gay pride or like on Miami Beach. You go
Right.
there, it's 90% gay folk, and that's
Sure.
it. There, it's an intermix of everybody.
That's so nice. It's really, it just makes a difference. And while we were on that topic, I thought I read somewhere that gay marriage is recognized now in Greece. Is that true?
It is, as of February the 15th of 2024 is when Parliament passed it. I think it really became into law on the 16th or 17th because of the way they do their laws. But prior to that, the last 10 years or so, I think it was 2015, because they were part of the EU, they were required, or the EU kind of forced them into recognizing gay marriage, but you had to register as domestic partners, and you had the same rights. You had the same legal rights. You just you couldn't be married in the church or in the government. So when Nick and we registered in Greece as domestic partners originally. I'm trying to articulate. We've been back since they passed gay marriage, but we don't know the process of what we have to do to update it because we used our marriage license from the States to register as domestic partners there. So
awesome. So
if I may, I think just automatically, Ken, that it's just simply recognized. If you needed to do anything legal, you just simply have to get an apostille and then have the document translated. Because in the past, your marriage from the States, for instance, or other parts of Europe, were not recognized. And if you needed to do something to become residents here, then you take the steps of going into the domestic partnership situation, like, with regards to visas, the golden visa, for instance, as in a spousal situation, we were able to get people to obtain the civil partnership so that they can actually obtain the golden visa as a couple. But now we're ready. We're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it sounds just like when we had domestic partners in the States. Yeah, it was a mess in the States too. I mean, I remember my now husband and I were domestic partners, and then we became civil unionized. We were civil unionized, so that was our like official marriage in Connecticut. And then we moved to Florida, and we weren't married anymore because Florida didn't recognize marriages. Right. Then a year later, the federal government recognized marriages, so we were living in Florida, and now we were married. So it's been a whirlwind. So it seems like it's a place it doesn't matter. I know Italy, it was similar because Italy, because they were part of the EU, they had to recognize same-sex marriage, but they never performed it. So, and they still don't to this day. Okay. So there are gay bars. How easy would you say, or difficult is it to make friends, whether it be expat community or locals? Where do you find yourselves like hanging out with the expat community mostly because of the language? Or Steve, you speak fluent. Do both of you speak fluent Greek?
I'm a beginner. I can communicate. I'm better at telling people what I want in Greek than I am understanding it. But I'm getting there.
Okay. So let's start with Steve. Steve, your friends, do you find it difficult or easy to make friends?
I moved here at the height of the pandemic in 2021. So pretty much no one wanted to see you. And so we pretty much stuck to our core. I have family here. So a lot of my social activity was revolving around family at that time. And also at the time I had like a full-time job. So I had some kind of social interaction, but it was difficult to make friends. However, I found that numerous Facebook groups created an opening for dialogue and the possibility of friendships. And I've made some very nice friends who I can call, at any time to just hang out and go visit. We have dinners and whatnot. So it's been quite nice. I mean, that's how Ken and I met, is through mutual friends. And, the irony was that Nick, his husband, was at this party and we're dancing like crazy, Greek dancing. And all of a sudden I'm like, Nick, is that you? And then it just evolved from there. So, there's just this, sometimes it's serendipity. Sometimes, it's activities. My choral activities have, created some nice friends. So, and I think that's pretty much anywhere that you go. If you're moving to a new place, you have to somehow get involved in activities. When I moved to Miami back in 1995, I pretty much knew no one. And it was miserable for quite a few months. But, you got to put yourself out there and take a few risks.
No one's going to come to you.
Right.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. Now, there's a difference amongst the Greek population, however, where I'm going to put it this way, that if you're not part of their circle of experiences and family and friends, they might not bring you in. And that's a very Southern European thing. It's not just a Greek thing from what I understand at this point. Mm-hmm. Now, where it comes to the gay community, obviously we're always open to bringing in new people and supporting each other, which, does create a difference in the experience. So, I can call any one of the gay friends that I've made through the choruses that I'm part of and just, get together, hang out, go for a coffee, have a drink or two. When we're performing, we're all just having a good laugh. So, yeah. But it really is, I think, about creating, activities and being a part of activities. And honestly, Facebook, I think, has been a great experience. And I've met a lot of people through that. And for me, luckily, I've made a lot of nice friends from my clients, very good friends. And so, I have them in my life. And, sometimes they're here for months on end. Some of them live here full time. And we just get together for, let's say, dinner or drinks and talk on the phone periodically, and it's quite nice.
And what I found fascinating is I reached out on Facebook groups and I spoke with both of you separately, not knowing that you knew each other.
Yeah.
So that freaked me out. I'm like, wow. Because I was like, wow, I have two good candidates for a podcast, or guests for a podcast, and you guys know each other. Right. How about you, Ken? Do you find it easy to make friends? Now, I know that you're not living there full time,
right?
But have you made some acquaintances and friends?
I never had any issue, but one thing, Steve's there permanently. I'm there seasonally.
Right.
Nick has family there. We met before we started going back and forth. We had a couple friends that do what we do. They spend 6 months there. They spend 6 months here. So initially, besides family, our Greek friends that we made were from acquaintances of other friends already. So we kind of had a network. And then it's like Steve says, the gay community, there are no strangers. You're a friend immediately. The neighborhoods, one thing that helped us a lot was I found this on Facebook, same way I found the information about your podcast. You sent when Nick and I purchased our second apartment, there was an ad on one of the Facebook groups, either like expats in Greece or expats in Athens or something, about it was a New York Times journalist, and she wanted to know if you bought property in Athens or about to buy property, I would like to talk to you. So I contacted her like the same way I did you, sent her an email. When we bought our second apartment, they were doing a story about people retiring or moving to Greece, just similar to you. But so she had one story in mind when we first started talking to her, and then she had an opportunity to put us in a different one. She said, you two would be perfect for this one, which was an article that they put out every Sunday in the real estate section called The Hunt. It's about narrowing. You find 3 properties, you narrow it down to one, and then you try to get the readership to see if they could pick the property either. We were their first international version of the hunt for the New York Times. And once that article came out, we had people from all over Greece contact us. They would contact the journalist herself. They would email her. We had people that realized, because we told them what neighborhood we didn't put the address. They told them what neighborhood we were in. They found our apartment, and most of the doors have buzzers on them. They found our building. Somebody came out. They went in. They knew it was the penthouse. So they went upstairs and they gave a note to our contractor, who then took a picture of it and sent it to us. But we've made like 8 different couples. The couple that I met Steve at their party, we met through the New York Times article. They contacted me. They said, hey, we're having a birthday party. And this was an hour north of Athens. And, Steve lived here at the same time I did. We have several acquaintances alike, but we met each other in Athens. But in Athens, I grew up in West Virginia. Nick calls me the hillbilly Greek. But so nobody's a stranger. Athens is very welcoming. Now, they might not invite you into their house, like Steve said. But if you're out and about in our first apartment, we have a very nice kitchen. And Nick cracks up when I tell you. You're going to laugh when I tell you this. But I refuse to let anybody cook on my stove. I haven't ever cooked on the old apartment, because it's a very small place. The first one's 400 square feet, or second one's 1,000 square feet with 700 square feet of balcony. But so we go out to eat every night. But when we eat out, the cost of living, we'll segue into that later on, I'm sure, where a dinner and some type of entertainment here for 2 in Miami averages about $150 a night. You can get the same thing for $60 to $70, less than half of what you get here. You can get there, and so you go out, you meet people, you just intertwine. Our contractor we've used him twice. His family's our family. I was there. They call the Monday before Fat Tuesday. Greek Easter and traditional Easter are not always the same day. And that's one of the biggest holidays, church holidays of the year. And they call it Clean Monday. Clean Monday, I was there, and I got invited to my contractor's mom's house with him and their whole family. It's like I'm family. But once you become family, you're family. So it's very easy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's get into language, because language could be a barrier. So Ken, let's start with you, because you're not fluent. And so is speaking Greek very important to anyone living there or moving there? And how do you overcome those boundaries?
You do not have to speak any Greek to make it or live in Athens. There's enough people that speak English. Now, one time you will need to speak Greek. And this is one of the reasons I say it's easy, is when you start dealing with government agencies, the
bureaucracy,
the utilities. And I'm not saying that they don't speak English, but you should probably take somebody with you that can speak pretty fluent. Nick speaks high intermediate Greek. He's not perfect, but he can get his,
At least you have one person that can.
So you need to find at least somebody that you trust enough that you can take to the agencies or the utilities or the government. And
how about hospitals?
Hospitals, don't. I've only been to a private hospital. That's where we have private health insurance in Greece. No problem whatsoever. None. And based on what I've heard, you don't have that much issue at the public hospital either, because most Greece, I told you this before, Greeks like the Cuba of the Americas. They have, as long as you can make the grade, you can get the education. If you make the grade, the education's free. And there's a lot of doctors and attorneys. There are Greek doctors all over Europe. There are Greek doctors in the United States because they were trained in Greece and then they moved on. So Greece English is almost all school children know Greece. Okay. I have nieces and nephews, or I call them nieces and nephews. You're always an uncle, no matter what family you are to your Greek family. So they speak very fluent Greek, and they live in a village of 35 people, and their English is impeccable, per se.
I think, though, living in a country where there's a different language, I think learning the language and living there, I think it's very important also to get the full understanding of the country and their customs and so on and so forth.
Correct. You will win the Greeks over faster by trying, even if it's thank you. The first line I learned was that, I want a glass of red wine. Fellow cookie no krasi parakalo. So that was the first line I learned. And from there on, if you say that, he's like, oh, he's trying at least. Steve may have. Go ahead.
And Steve, you're fluent. So
yes.
What are your opinions about learning the language and being fluent?
I'll say this. I mean, I am at a fluent level, but I'm not at the very high level that a native Greek individual is here. I get by very well. When I moved here in 2021, I also took a year's worth of classes every week so that I can get to a higher level with vocabulary and grammar and different things. And over time, almost day by day, I get better and better. Different angles, let's say. My experience has been that I have an American accent when I speak Greek. So a lot of people just want to speak to me in English.
In English.
So I'm like, okay, sometimes I'll just indulge them, and sometimes I'll speak Greek to them and they'll speak English to me, and we just have that little experience, and it's fun. What I've experienced, though, because I'm so involved in the day-to-day life, is that there's varying degrees of English knowledge. And you'll find some people that have absolutely no knowledge at all. They might just be able to say hello, goodbye, and a few other words. And you might go to a bakery and you'll be lucky if you can find someone who speaks enough English to explain to you what the ingredients are in a certain baked good, for instance. Mm-hmm. When you go to restaurants, you'll likely find someone who I think will speak substantially more English. Because they're communicating with a variety of different people, especially in the historic district. If you come to my neighborhood, however, you might not find that experience. Okay. And we talked about the healthcare system. What I've experienced is that the doctors, because of their education levels and their interest in learning languages, and especially English, they get it to a higher level. And so they're not going to speak to our level of English, but their level of English is quite respectable. Quite a few doctors have lived and worked outside of the country in, let's say, London or the States, and so their English is quite good. The nurses, other practitioners, they might have a little bit of English, but not as much as the doctors. So I know I'm getting a bit detailed about this, but I think there's a need for a bit of a distinction. Overall, when you go shopping, whether you're in the high-end stores or low-end stores, you'll find people who speak English. And then you'll have some people like me who will just jump in and help, and, see what I can do. Overall, I would say that the majority of people that I know who don't speak a lot of Greek or don't speak any Greek are very happy being here in Athens. And in general in Greece, you'd find that most people in the bigger cities speak quite a lot of English. Especially in the tourist towns, they sometimes speak better English than the ones in Athens, from what I've experienced. But then you get into small towns, and it's hit or miss. You just never know, to what degree people are going to be speaking English. I think it really depends on the family experience, whether education is that important to them, whether communicating with someone in English, whether they're from another country, is going to be essential for their daily life. So those are some of the distinctions there, I think we can say. Now, by comparison, however, and I think I mentioned this to you the other day, I went to Rome for the very first time. I'd never been to Italy, so I went to Rome last October. I was absolutely shocked for such a large tourist experience in the capital city of Italy that few people spoke English. Like, I can speak a few words of Italian, and I would ask people if they, speak English or Greek in Italian. But by comparison, there are many more people speaking English here than what I experienced in Rome. I've spent some time in Germany, quite a few months at different parts of my life, and that also kind of depends on the education level of the individual and whether they're interested. I found that more Germans are not interested in speaking to you in English. I would say probably more so than the French, because the French have a very bad reputation for not wanting to speak English. But, I just throw out a few French words here and there and a few French phrases and I'm good. So, yeah. So, I'm actually quite proud that people here are open to learning. Over the years that I've been coming here, and Ken, since you've been coming here since 1987, you probably noticed the evolution of signage, of people's wanting to throw in English words while they're speaking Greek. A lot of English words are incorporated now into our language. And so even when you're watching television, for instance, you're going to see commercials in English. You'll see, advertisements in English. Or mixed Greek and English. There was one guy yesterday who posted on Facebook. He's like, "Oh, I'm so perturbed that, they have to mix in like English and Greek into this KFC advertisement for this silly sandwich or whatever." I'm like, yeah, this is how we're evolving here.
Wow.
Yeah.
It depends where you are in Europe, it seems. There are some countries, even Spain. I've talked to people where, it's limited English. So yeah, it's kind of refreshing that Athens, you could really move to Athens and not know English and survive at least.
Yeah.
One of the reasons one of the catalysts to the English was the 2004 Olympics. When the 2004 Olympics came, when it was held in Athens, all the signs are in Greek and English. And so I think that was the transitional period for the vast majority.
Ken, you're right. I would say that's 100% correct. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so we'll start off the next question with Steve about the local economy. Since you are full-time, what would you, and you are a realtor and have a business in realty, in Athens. Can you provide examples of what a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, either apartment or house in Athens? I'm kind of thinking there are more apartments than houses. I could be wrong. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us housing costs, renting versus owning, what utilities look like as far as gas and electric, cable, internet.
Okay. So let's start with, first of all, housing costs. Okay. So a 2-bedroom, generally speaking, is going to run anywhere between 500 to 1,000 or more, depending on the neighborhood. So if you were in a high-end neighborhood, of course, you're going to pay high-end prices. But there are a lot of locations that give you decent quality housing for a much lower cost. At 500, you might be in what Greeks might consider a marginal neighborhood or a very undesirable neighborhood. But coming from Philadelphia, having experienced Miami, having experienced New York City, having experienced a lot of the cities in the USA and business travel over the years, I would say even those neighborhoods, although they're considered marginal by Greek standards, they're actually perfectly fine. And it only has to do with the fact that some Greeks just don't really tolerate multiculturalism as well as we do. Now, I'll give you perspective on my place, for instance, where I live right now. It's not very big. It's a very small, let's say, New York-style apartment. It's about just over 500 square feet. And it's an old building. It's a family building. And so it was built for this family that has lived here over the years, and the owner's downstairs. Built in the early 60s. So it's got a very old look, which I like. It's very charming. So I'm only paying €300 a month.
Wow.
Which is dirt cheap. And years ago, just even, a few years ago, properties were even lower priced than that. I would say, for most places that Americans would want to, move to, let's say where Ken is, for instance, you're at Elysia, correct?
Correct, yes.
You're Kasariani Elysia, yeah.
Right.
So that area for 1-bedroom apartment, you're probably looking at between 700 and 900, depending on the quality of the building and the unit. But it's a great location. It's a perfect location.
And 700 to 900, that's like fancy?
We're talking euros. We're talking euros.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's
Exactly.
Wow.
also, it's plus common area maintenance fees. So if your building has an elevator, which normally they do, the electricity for the common areas, the cleaning, that can run anywhere between like 30 and 50 euros per month, depending. If the building has what's called central heating, where they have one heating system for the entire building, then that
Hmm.
brings up the costs substantially. Purchasing property is a whole different experience, obviously. Some people can find places that are less than 100,000 if that's what they're needing, but there's going to be areas that are kind of sketchy still, or just not very well equipped for public transportation. And then it goes up from there. Literally just goes up from there. So it's, the average I would say is around for one bedroom between 150 and 200,000 euros for something decent in a good neighborhood. And then it goes up from there. Of course, if you're getting a two bedroom, you're dealing with a much higher cost structure. If I were to buy something where I live, I'm not far from the port of Piraeus, about 10 minutes drive. Someone can get something for between 100 and 200,000, and it's a decent size. And it all depends on the age of the building, which is a factor that a lot of Greeks take into account, more so the Greeks than the foreigners. Um, Heating is a different, unique scenario altogether than what we have in America. And I see Ken is smiling about this. So we either get our heat through our air conditioners. Most of them now are inverter systems, so they're very economical. Some buildings, like where I live, it's set up on a central system. So I contribute to the oil for the heating system with my landlady. And so she controls it because it was a family building. And we just pay for filling up the tank for the season. So for this past season, which we didn't have a lot of, cold temperatures, and keeping in mind, I don't have insulation. I don't have good windows. So there's a lot of seepage. There's a lot of flow. I paid around 400 or 450. I don't remember exactly, but it was well over 400 for the oil, my contribution for my size apartment. She has basically double the size, so she spent a lot more as a result.
For the season or the year?
Just for the season. We don't have a cold, long cold season. So
Okay.
we turned on the heat around Christmas and we shut it off. I would say early March was the last cold spell that we had. So, roughly 8 to 10 weeks. Okay. Now, many neighborhoods have had gas lines installed by the government. And so a building can connect into a gas line to serve the residents. And so each resident can connect to the gas system that's in their building and then have their own private heating system. So gas was very cheap at one time, and now it's got more expensive than oil, but it's still cheaper than electric overall. But with the gas, you can also put, a gas stove if you wanted to. So that
Right.
makes it appealing. One thing that I really like with the gas systems is that you can also have your hot water built into the system. So it's this big rectangle that just either can be indoors or outdoors, and it creates hot water instantaneously through the gas burner for the radiators and also for your on-demand hot water, which is quite nice. So those are the three different heating systems we normally find in the condominiums here. Now, going back to one question you had, a two bedroom can be found in a house, but there aren't that many houses left because they either were torn down or sold or just are basically unlivable and they're not transferable for ownership yet.
Are they abandoned?
Some are. Some have been renovated, and some were basically given to builders to do a sort of a trade between the property owner and the builder, where the property owner would obtain one or two units and the builder would sell off the other ones. So we have a word for that called antiparochi, which is essentially the system that was used to build up the entirety overall of the condominiums that you see in Athens and other parts of Greece, through that system of obtaining land and having the builders build up and selling off most of the units while giving the landowner a few units for themselves. So it's
Quick
quite
question.
a unique thing.
Quick question. Is it uncommon to have a two bedroom two bath in Greece or
It is
Athens?
uncommon. Normally, it's one bathroom. Most often, with a two bedroom, you might find, depending on where and how old the building is, it might be a full bathroom and a half bath, a WC as we call it here.
What's up with that? I'm too bougie. I need my own bathroom.
I know. The nice thing is that we don't have like what's the word in English? Support walls. Like the wall behind me it's a load bearing. Thank you. We have the columns and the beams that deal with across the walls. So you can generally take down walls and recreate your entire floor plan if you wanted to. I don't know if you guys did that, Ken, because the walls. Sorry.
In both apartments, we totally got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So normally the walls are basically brick, whereas the exterior is poured concrete. And between buildings, it's poured concrete. And all that is, the poured concrete has rebar. So your interior can be modified. So if you needed to have two full baths and you have the space, let's say you have over 1,000 square meter or square feet, which is over 100 square meters, then you can kind of configure it the way you want to. You can make it a bigger kitchen. You can do an open floor plan. You can add your bathroom. You can put in a laundry room. Just a variety of different things you can do. So you can be as bougie as you want.
Now, speaking of bougie, now Ken, he mentioned he lives in a penthouse, right? So you have a penthouse apartment. To me, that's a little bougie.
Yeah,
So what's your penthouse apartment like?
it's 1,000 square meters feet on the inside, a little over 100 square meters, and 700 square feet of balcony. Back to, I think we're discussing cost of living. One thing about Greece compared to the United States, energy is much more expensive in Europe, and not only in Greece. So where we pay $3.50 for a gallon of gas, they sell it in liters, but comparably, it's around $1.90 per liter. But that's about $7.50 for a gallon.
Yes.
So so your electricity is higher. Your water isn't that bad, but so anything to do with electricity or gas or oil is higher than in the United States. I'm trying to think.
Is that because of the war in Ukraine?
No, it's always been, hasn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
Yes. Can I add something to the gas thing? So as similar to the United States, you have more people traveling in the summer by car. So you're mentioning, Ken, that it's like $7.50 per gallon. I spend a lot more. Mine's more like $9 per gallon because I have to put in, better grade. But in the summertime, it's not unusual to be spending well over $10 per gallon for gasoline. It just jumps up because, people are traveling all around the country and we have all these tourists. And so the demand for gasoline is just substantially higher. So, yeah, it's pretty expensive.
Yeah. Correct. So the other thing is public transportation. We mentioned being in the city. It's very, very, they got three major metro lines, subway, train, subway. And then you have a train system, too, that covers a part of the city. You have buses, trams. Taxis are very accessible. You can use Uber or it's not Beat anymore. What's it called?
Taxi Beat or something. I don't remember. I never use it.
Yeah, so you can use that. So transportation is relatively inexpensive in Greece. You can get a one-way subway ticket for a $1.80, or let's say $2, or you can get a 5-day ticket for $9.
I think it's only $120, Ken. I think it's only $120.
Okay. So
it's really cheap. It's really cheap here.
Really cheap. And then if you
how about for old people like me, seniors?
There's
any discounts?
There is a little bit of discount if you're a resident. If you're a resident and old, the Metro Pass. If you buy a Metro Pass, which you can get for €50 a month if you live there part time, it covers buses, trains, trams, so any public transportation you can ride.
I'm gonna correct you a little bit, Ken, because I use the Metro card monthly, and it's only like $27 a month. It's 27 or 29. I can't remember exactly. I just it's just dirt cheap. It's amazing. We're one of the cheapest capital cities for public transportation in all of Europe.
That's
The
awesome.
reason
Yeah.
it's $20 for you is because you buy it every month. If you buy it just a month at a time,
You can
then
do it
it
on the
costs
regular
you.
cards as well. You can do it on the
So
regular ticket things that they give you. Nevertheless, those are
yeah, yeah.
details that certainly can
Correct.
change.
So
If I can add, Mark, you were asking about other utilities, for instance, like internet, and the electric's expensive, I'm going to say, but I think when I compared it to the cost of what I experienced in Florida, it's sort of on par. In the Philadelphia area, it's a little bit cheaper to have electricity, running pretty often. I think here a lot of people find it expensive because of the proportion of cost to their income. So that's a big part of the conversation. Now, internet has actually gotten quite cheap and it's very competitive. I recently helped out a client set up 500 megabytes per second with Cosmote, which is the main provider, and she got it for only €42 a month, which is pretty
Wow.
fantastic. We also have
exactly.
Starlink. A few of my clients have purchased Starlink, and
Oh, we have that
their
here.
costs have gone down substantially. I think they're only about either 45 or 50 a month. And they have this like flat panel now that sort of sits on the tabletop, so you don't have to do any installation. So that's a really good option for people who are out in the country, for instance, or even just
Hmm.
in certain dead zones.
Yeah.
And then you touched on kind of going back to the language where dealing with utilities and government stuff, those are things that, can get complicated for people. So that's one of the things that I do for my clients is get everything set up for them. But, also searching for the potential really good deals. And fortunately, I found an energy broker who's been helping me out with setting up electric and gas accounts for my clients, where she researches the best possible cost structure. And we kind of just flip around from one to the other every few months, and it works out beautifully, and there's no cost to switching. So, you can play the game if you want to.
That's great. Ken, tell us about arts and culture.
Arts and culture. One thing we can do that when we get to medical. When we get to medical, we'll discuss the cost there of that. Arts and culture. Athens has everything you need, everything you want in arts and culture. We have the opera, you have festivals, you have their football, being soccer, football. There's nothing that you get in New York that you can't get in Athens.
So they have live theater.
They have live theater. They have one of their festivals every year is the Epidaurus Festival, which lasts June, July, and part of August. You can see some of the best bands in the world comes in to Athens, and you have some of the outdoor venues are amazing. Some of them like the Paralympic Stadium, or even the new Olympic Stadium from 2004. You have great movies. It's just extremely well put.
Can you go to a movie theater and do they have like subtitles or?
Yeah, yes, they do.
Sometimes they might even play it in English, right?
Correct, and it'll be subtitled in Greek.
Yeah.
We always come back to the language thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we also have that with television. And did you know, Ken and Mark, we actually have outdoor theaters that operate in the summer. They're very popular here all around the country. But we also have, large indoor theaters that basically provide first-run movies, just like in the States, with fantastic acoustic systems.
When you say outdoor theaters, what type of theaters? Is it live theater or is it
movie theaters? Movie theaters.
Yeah. Like a drive-in. Only it's like a walk-in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's so cool.
Yeah. And there are several.
Most of our music concerts are outdoors throughout the summer.
I love it.
Because we don't have too much of a risk of rain. On occasion we do, but it's kind of rare. So most of the concerts that I've been to are outdoors. My favorite being the Irodion, which is at the foothills of the Acropolis. And that's just the most special place to watch any kind of program, whether it's theatrical, opera, concerts of any sort. It's unbelievable to be in that. Yeah, to be in a 2,000-year-old amphitheater.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive. And you mentioned, Ken, the Epidaurus Festival. So, and I'm going to pronounce it in Greek. At the ancient theater of Epidavros in Peloponnesos, you find the best possible theater experience, because that theater is a proper acoustically designed theater that requires no amplification. It's absolutely amazing. So, yeah, we have a lot of those throughout the country. A lot of cultural events take place in those amphitheaters that are built into the sides of mountains, whether they're very old or very new. We're using a lot of our ancient theaters at different parts of the country, including Athens, to be a part of the entire cultural experience. So it's quite impressive.
That's awesome. If either of you get the chance to take pictures of those theaters and those cultural outdoor events, I would love to post them on my Instagram. And
I have a couple, because the last person I saw at the Odeon was Sting. And that was an amazing, I can send you some of those. And
that'd be awesome.
And even at the Epidaurus, the one in the Peloponnese with Steve.
Sounds like an epidural.
Yeah, I've got pictures from there. But there's a rock in the center of the theater that if you stand there and I talk to you the way I'm talking to you right now, you can hear me in the top row.
Yes.
Wow.
Just like I'm sitting right beside you.
That's amazing.
We also have... Area... Go ahead, Ken. Go ahead, please.
One area that we did not cover is museums in our arts and entertainment. The museums in Athens are phenomenal. You have the Acropolis Museum, you have the Benaki Museum, you have the War Museum, but there's a Byzantium Museum there. All of these museums are top notch. Some of the best museums you'll see in the world.
That's awesome.
I will agree with that. There's a huge variety of museums here. There's even an Islamic art museum, numerous art galleries throughout the area, the art museums in general, even the original archaeological museum over by Victoria Station. You can spend literally days just experiencing the museums, and they're quite spectacular. I was going to say, we also have quite a lot of music venues and music concerts that are free.
Concerts.
What are they called? The music teaching centers, Odeon. We have the Megaro Musikis, which is the equivalent to Lincoln Center in New York City, as something to relate to. With numerous theaters, we have the Stavros Niarchos Foundation building, which houses the National Opera and the National Library. Both spectacular, and there's numerous cultural activities taking place within that building on basically an everyday basis, with numerous concerts even just outside at their large pool, if you will. So, culturally, we have so many great things to experience, and they're well advertised and, priced really well. That's, another thing. You don't have to spend a lot of money for opera. You can go to opera for like 50 to 100 per person. Yeah. Or less sometimes.
It's half of what it is in the U.S. It's half of what we pay in the U.S.
The only thing that I really miss, and it's a pain point, is we don't have the shows, like Broadway shows and what you find in London. We don't have those, experiences. Once in a while, they had like Phantom of the Opera come in at different places, but it's not at the same scale as what you experience in those two cities.
That's one thing I would miss.
London, it's only 4 hours away, and
I was going to say
the airfares are cheap. I'm heading to London in about 2 weeks, and it was only €225. So it's pretty
reasonable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of transportation, getting back to that again, just one question: how close is the airport to Athens?
By metro, it's 40 minutes to the center. You can take a bus. It takes you a little longer on bus. The bus is cheaper. I think it's €6 to get there by bus. It's €9 to get there by the metro.
Okay. How about by car?
It all depends on... By car, from my location, it's between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on traffic. From Central, it's about 30 minutes because of some of the shortcuts. There's the line that takes you from the airport into Central Athens can also take you directly to the port. So that takes roughly 1 hour from airport to the port of Piraeus. So the connection is really quite fantastic. And Ken alluded to the airport bus, which can also go to the port, but it goes directly into downtown Athens for like, what is it, €6 or something?
€6 from the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then taxis.
That's one of my
yeah, I was going to say it's
that's
taxis
one of my
less than €50.
requirements.
Yeah.
Right.
One of my requirements to live in a place is make sure I'm close to the airport, an international airport.
Yeah.
So 45 minutes, an hour the most would be my limit.
Yes, it's just around that.
Okay.
One thing we should bring up while we're on transportation again. The traffic is not easy in Athens. It's a very congested city. The public transportation system, if you have a chance, I'd much rather ride that than I would even drive my own car across town.
So this is where we differ, okay? Because Ken, you're a Greek hillbilly, if you will.
Yeah.
I grew up and spent most of my life in big cities. To me, Athens is no different than Philadelphia. Rush hour is always going to be rush hour. I've driven through New York City. I've driven through Miami, obviously. I've driven, through London and different parts of Europe. I actually find Athens to be on par with just a standard city. It's not terrible. What is terrible, however, is dealing with motorcyclists. That's the most challenging part of driving through Athens. Aside from that, New York is much more complicated and much more congested, especially Manhattan. And, let's say going into Queens and Brooklyn. London, for instance, if you needed to travel 10 miles in London and you didn't leave at a certain time of the day, you were stuck in traffic for 2 hours. That doesn't happen here. I can travel 10 miles in 30 minutes or less.
If you have a dignitary in town, the whole city shuts down. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Look, let's face it. If there's protests around Sindagma at the main square, if there's, other kinds of weird activities or even events, let's say gay pride starts over there. Yeah, it shuts down the city, at least the core of the city. But the surrounding areas, are pretty free to move around. So my perspective, realistically, is it's not that bad.
It's just like a big city.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a typical city. So,
let's move on and talk about crime. Every city has crime. How is Athens? We'll start this one with Steve.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about crime. Is there a homeless issue? I know that I don't believe that you're allowed guns as you are in the United States, except for maybe hunting. So tell us about crime, violent crime versus petty theft.
I think I know your question. So I just want to make a distinction between homelessness and crime. The two don't necessarily intertwine. Okay. During the financial crisis that we had and the years after, there was a very big problem with homelessness and the economic situation was dire. Things have changed, fortunately. We're not seeing as many people roaming the streets. We're not seeing as many people picking, food out of trash cans. We're not seeing as many people laying out on the streets. By comparison to what I've experienced in Philadelphia and what I've seen in New York and what I know of in San Francisco, but also in London, our homeless situation is not nearly as bad. Okay, for one. Crime overall here in Athens is very low. What our biggest concerns with criminal activity is theft. Petty theft and also, in some cases, break-ins into people's homes while they're not here. So it's not unusual for people to be gone for weeks at a time, especially in August. And if they're not boarding up their houses properly, there might be targets for a break-in. Overall, the crime rate is extremely low. In the main tourist zones, it's no different than going into Barcelona, Madrid, Rome, London. You have pickpockets, you have all sorts of crazy things going on, but it's not really the same extent, I think. I've never experienced anything, except for one time I had a situation where somebody tried to steal my iPhone from a cafe because I left it on the table and wasn't paying attention. And I caught him. Car theft is very low here. And violent crime is extremely low. I would say Greece is one of the safest places for LGBT and women and pretty much anyone who could potentially seem like a victim. And they're not going to get victimized. People will gang up on violators, if you will. There are a lot of people here who will stand up for your rights if you're
Wow.
being harmed. A lot. They will get in your face too if you're doing something wrong. Okay. So overall, I would say it's quite safe. Even, for a big city like Athens, it's quite safe. It's not unusual, and I say this, from friends of mine, it's not unusual for female friends of mine to be walking around late at night, walking home from wherever they were without any fear whatsoever. Now, there's certain pockets here and there, but, but Ken's perspective might be a bit different.
Ken, what's your take?
Crime is extremely low here, and especially violent crime. It's actually one of the lowest in Europe and definitely lower than in the United States. Pickpockets on the subway, if you're not paying attention, especially busy in the summer with a lot of tourists. But other than that, you're not going to, I would walk anywhere in Athens. I have no problem going anywhere at any hour, anywhere in Athens.
That's pretty refreshing. Every minute of this podcast talking to you guys, I'm kind of like, why haven't we done Greece before? And it seems I want to go there.
Yeah.
I want to check it out.
Yep.
Yes. So, okay. So crime is really not an issue. And the gun laws, what are the gun laws? Is it the same as in the EU that you really can't carry guns without a permit for hunting, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Okay, so I'll feel safe going. If I lived in Center City, and I'd feel safe if I had to take my dog out 2 a.m, you think I would feel safe doing that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My kind of place. All right. Let's get into healthcare real quick.
Yes.
Let's talk about the different systems, the private, the public. Are there enough doctors in Athens to treat all of the population? How fast could you get in to see a doctor? Do you need to see specialists? Does that take longer? Let's start that off with Steve.
So my experience has been very positive. And overall, it's not that different than what I've experienced in the cities I lived in the States. The structure is different, however. For me, being a resident and contributing to the public health system, my cost is very low overall for services. Now, even if I were to pay out of pocket, the cost of testing, doctor visits, all sorts of things is quite low. And I'll give you some perspective. So about 3 years ago, when I first moved here, I had an MRI done, basically full body scan. That cost me €225 for an MRI. Just about a week ago, I had some ultrasounds done and blood work. So it was 2 different ultrasounds, different organs and whatever, and blood work. Out of pocket with my public health cost, it was €14. If I were to have to pay out of pocket for those tests, I probably would have paid in total $150. Okay. For years, I've taken asthma medication. In the States, it cost me over $350. Here, if I were to pay out of pocket, it costs me less than $40. And you don't need a prescription for many of the medications here, except for antibiotics and controlled substances. I was a health insurance agent for many years in the States. I was a Medicare specialist for many years. The elderly are taken care of very well. It's not that difficult to get appointments. I see an endocrinologist, and generally speaking, I might have, recently have waited 2 weeks at the most. Right. Certain other subspecialties might take longer, but it all depends on the severity of a case and whether or not, the doctor can squeeze you in. Surgeries are a bit different, I think, and they just introduced a new system where they're doing afternoon surgeries where people can pay out of pocket to have surgeries done in the public system where they don't have to wait as long as they used to. I have a friend who had a hip replacement about a year ago. And she spent, for the surgeon and for some private healthcare at home, roughly €2,000 to get those services. Everything else was covered in the public system. So for those who, let's say, have citizenship in this country, or planning to work in this country, or have citizenship in the EU, or have access to EU citizenship, if you will, and they're working here, they can be covered through their employer. They might have a private health insurance policy through their employer. I personally have coverage through the public health system, and it costs me $150 per month for that contribution, which will go up in about a year or two. And I also have a simple private policy for hospitalization and some disability cover. When we compare the costs of medical care, even if it's out of pocket, it is literally a fraction of the cost of what you all spend in the United States. Literally, for excellent care, excellent hospitals, excellent facilities, excellent doctors. And, every country, every location has its quacks and its not so goods and whatever.
Sure.
But, when you're connected to the community, you can usually find people that will recommend. The Facebook groups have been a godsend. We can, ask for any type of specialty, and people will chime in and discuss, who they like. We also have a doctor finding system that has sort of a review categorization that you can, connect with doctors. And quite a few of the insurance companies have their own participating providers where, like, for instance, I have mine through an old policy with MetLife. And so my doctor visits are only €20 per visit, flat rate. So I've been very happy with it. I can't complain. I've had, relatives and friends having major surgeries. An uncle of mine had open heart surgery. He's walking around like a spring chicken. So,
yeah, I could tell the price. You said like something like $2,000 for a hip replacement, where I think, and I'm just pulling this out of my head, but I'm thinking, because my husband had one, I'm thinking it's like 160,000 here. So,
Right.
So it's quite some difference. And Ken, how about yourself? Are you on their system at all since you go back and forth?
I have a private health policy in Greece. Mm-hmm. That policy costs, for my husband and I both, we pay about €3,600 a year.
Oh, wow.
And
for both.
Yes, that's for both of us. And in the States, we pay right at $2,000 a month.
I hear you.
So, and going back to Steve's thing, the 2,000 was with part, if I remember correctly, that was their pay for the public, right? The whole hip replacement here is less than $8,000 out of pocket. If you came here and you wanted to have a hip replacement, you could walk in, like Steve mentioned earlier, like an afternoon surgery, pay and get the whole thing for $8,000 vice the $160 in the U.S.
Wow.
And if the way I feel right now, if any surgery I needed, I would rather have it in Greece than the United States. It's just, I'm that comfortable with the doctors and everything that I see. There is not one thing that I would hesitate having done in Greece as opposed to the United States.
I would like to just add to kind of create a realistic expectation. We are talking about Athens right now and also the big cities. There are major challenges, however, in remote areas. There are major challenges in islands. There's a few islands that don't even have a doctor, like a primary care doctor anymore, because they can't attract them, for various reasons. And some of the island facilities are just clinics, basically. They may not even have a hospital. So, if you needed specialty tests done, you have to come right back to Athens or go to a big city that has what you need. So, the challenge that Greece has, we're a pretty substantial country for a small country, but the challenges were fragmented. It's very fragmented. It's not at all like what we have in the States. So, but, if you think about it, if you go to some communities in the States, they also don't have, great healthcare facilities. So,
right.
But where we're talking about Athens,
where you are.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're the capital of the country. We have all the politicians. We have very wealthy people here that live here full time. There's expectations. We have amazing cosmetic surgery here, believe it or not. That's, dirt cheap. So, it's a substantially different cost structure and experience.
Great. So we're running a little late. So let's get to visas. Does Greece have temporary visas and permanent visas? How does the visa system work in Greece? Do you have to obtain a visa in the United States in order to first start the whole process? How does that work? Let's start, Ken.
Yeah, they have both temporary visas and long-term visas. The temporary visa is typically a 1 to 2 year visa, where a long-term can be 5 years, up to 5 years. There's a financially independent, like people who are listening to this podcast probably fall into two categories. The financially independent visa, which you would apply for in the United States before going at the local consulate or embassy. In order to qualify for the financially independent visa, the primary applicant needs to have an income of 2,000 euros a month. I think that's about 2,400 euros. Dollars, 2,400. If you bring your spouse, you have to have an additional 400 euros, so 2,400 euros, 2,800 US dollars a month. Or you can actually deposit that money, enough of the monthly, like let's say $48,000 into a bank account and draw it from there. But you either have to prove that you have an income of the let's say the 2,800, or put the money in a bank. So
that's bank account.
Yeah, and that would get you for 5 years. That's a long term.
No,
if you want it,
two.
Is it two? Okay,
two.
Then also the golden visa, which I can go into, but you probably get more information from Steve. They just did some changes to the golden visa. It started out 2 years ago. You could get it for $250,000 in Greece. Last year, they changed certain areas to 500,000. This year, they changed some to 800 and 400. The 800 in the major metropolitan areas and some of the islands where people want to live. So you have those. They came out with 2 brand new visas this year, which are skilled, kind of like the U.S. has skilled people visas. Like if you're a certain skill and they can't get that skill in Greece, they can hire you outside and get you a visa that way. There were 2 of those they introduced in March, so in the middle of March. And so you have both.
So they have digital nomad also?
They do have digital nomad. You can apply for that and work in the United States as long as you are not taking a job away from a Greek citizen. But if you're working as a digital nomad, you have your employer in the States or London or wherever, you can have those as well.
I'll add to that in a minute.
And do you start the process in the States?
Yes.
To get a visa?
I'm not saying you cannot start in Greece, but they prefer you to start prior to. So.
Awesome. Steve?
So I'll add a little bit to Ken's statements. For the FIP visa, it is best to start it in the States. Some people do hire attorneys to make that happen here. It all depends on the person's, situation. The digital nomad visa basically requires a person to be either self-employed or employed by an employer outside of this country. Mm-hmm. It could be a European employer. It could be an American employer wherever else. However, there is an income requirement of $3,500 per month that you have to demonstrate as your income consistently to qualify
from
for
your
that.
Business.
And that also can be applied for in the States. I know some clients have actually hired an attorney to make that happen so that they can just not deal with the situation. Because a lot of times in the States, if you're not in the Northeast, you have a difficult time getting to the consulates. Like, if you're in, I think, let's say Colorado, you have to go to San Francisco. If you're in Arizona, like yourself, you have to go to LA. Whereas somebody from Philadelphia can go to New York in 2 hours and you're good. So, yeah, those 2 ideally applied for in the States. The other 2 that Ken mentioned are fairly new. They always had a skilled visa of some sort, but they kind of formalized it a little bit more. But nevertheless, I'm not going to touch into that. The golden visa, however, has had some major changes over the last couple of years, as Ken has mentioned. And that had to do with a lot of pressure from Brussels to either remove the golden visa scenario altogether, or in our case, completely modify it. And there was a lot of political pressure in this country as well to change the golden visa requirements. I'm going to be recording a video that'll be posting on YouTube on my channel that will go into detail about the golden visa. But basically, the major cities like Athens and our surrounding region, Thessaloniki and Mykonos, Santorini, and a few other locations are at 800,000 minimum investment for only one property. Other locations within Greece are at 400,000 for one property. And there's some rules tied into whether or not you can rent out the property short term. Okay. So I'll go into that in my YouTube. It's too long to get into here. There is also, in some cases, depending on a person's needs, if they're looking to work here, there are a couple companies that are customer service centers that can obtain a visa for non-Greek residents specific to that company, and they can only work for that company. Not the greatest job in the world, but I know some people who worked it, who continue to work it, and they handle accounts like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Mercedes-Benz and BMW, quite a few companies that we know. And so those are, let's say, generally speaking, for younger people or those who are okay with customer service roles. They're not great paying jobs, of course, but for someone who just wants to have a job and applies for it and gets it, it's a great way to obtain some kind of a residency here. These visas...
How long does it take for citizenship? Sorry.
The citizenship requires a person to be a legal resident for a minimum of 7 years. That's when you can start applying for the citizenship. So you have to know Greek by that time, at least on a B2 level, which is the European scale for languages, and also know historical context and pass an examination. People, have done it. It is possible. You have to really study and, of course, learn the language to a pretty high level overall.
Got it. Very good.
And just to
Let's
clarify,
move along.
I can, just to clarify, the visas are specific to living in Greece. A lot of people think that a golden visa will give them access to also living long-term in, let's say, Italy or Spain or France. That's not the case. It's specific to living here. So if you got the golden visa, let's say in Spain, I don't remember if they still have them, it is specific to that country. You become a resident of that country, but you're given free access to the Schengen zone, which is essentially the European zone.
Right.
Yeah, but not to work.
Does that mean if I buy a golden visa, or I spend 800,000 in Athens to live in Athens, and I buy a home, that means that's only good for Greece and not good for anywhere in the Schengen zone?
Correct.
That's correct. You can do 90 days every 180 days in any other part of Europe or in any other part of the Schengen area. But you can only reside in Greece. You can stay, let me put it this way, you can stay in Greece all 365 days.
Right.
You would become a tax resident. But the remaining time, you still fall under the rules every 90 and every 180. You can have 90 days but you have free travel within Schengen.
Right.
And I think their recent changes are probably for the best. My opinion at the beginning was like, wow, golden visas sound so great. I can spend, $500,000 or €500,000 and buy property and become a resident. But thinking about it, all of these foreign investors come in, buy up, land, buy up real estate, and Airbnb them out and price out everybody else out of the country, or the city.
The biggest problem that occurred that they didn't think through is the fact that they were allowing the golden visa to be an accumulation of properties that went over 250,000. Now it's only for one property. So someone could have bought two properties at 125,000 apiece and were able to get their golden visa. And that happened quite often because we had really cheap properties 10 years ago, like absolute dirt cheap. Yeah. And, we're still, we're still the very lowest cost capital for real estate in Europe.
Yes.
So we have nowhere else to go but up. I do want to add, however, that with every one of these visas we talked about, it's an absolute must that someone maintain a minimum health insurance policy within Greece. And those are actually quite low cost. The requirement is just a simple hospital policy, and it's only 120 per person per year. Of course, people can get something more generous if they need to, but that's going to be the minimum. But it's required that you maintain that throughout the visa process.
Does Greece have a wealth tax? Do you know? Anybody?
No wealth tax, but they do have an inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax.
Yes, no wealth tax.
And is the inheritance tax based on worldwide assets? So in other words, let's say myself and my spouse, if I were to pass away, does the spouse automatically get everything, or do they have to pay inheritance tax?
They have to pay
on all of my worldwide assets.
They have to pay on all of your worldwide assets. It's 10%.
Okay.
And if it's not a family member or a immediate family member, it goes up to 20%. So, but spouses it's 10%. And this is one, we didn't really discuss this as becoming a tax resident in Greece. One of the reasons that Nick and I are not living in Greece full time right now is because once we become a tax resident of Greece, which means we spent more than 183 days a year in Greece, then we were taxed on worldwide income in both Greece and the United States. The Greece and the United States have a reciprocal tax policy that what I pay in one, I don't have to pay in the other. But let me give you an example. I'll just use earned income. In earned income, let's say in the United States, I make the earned income and I pay 35% tax. And in Greece, the highest tax bracket is 44%. And it starts at 40,000 euros. So any American, if there's two couples, you and your husband, you start drawing Social Security, you're over the 40,000, more than likely. So what would happen that in that situation is you would pay your 35% in the U.S., then you would have to pay, then you would be required to pay the next, 9% in Greece. So you would pay in Greece. One thing about the U.S. is the tax that we know when our tax day is. Every year it falls on the same day, within a few days, you know what I mean?
Right.
In Greece, it changes significantly.
Wow. It would throw me off.
Yeah. So theoretically, what would happen is we would pay our U.S. taxes, and then we would figure out what we'd have to pay in Greece. But by not crossing that 183-day threshold, we don't have to pay. The only taxes we pay in Greece are our real estate taxes, and they are extremely low compared to the U.S. Extremely. I'll give you an example. We have two properties. The two properties, we paid our taxes this week. We paid $430 US for two properties for the year. So
yeah,
it's quite inexpensive.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I just listed a property yesterday that we're putting on the market for 1.1 million, and their property tax is like 1,200 for the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I want to add something with regards to tax and an opportunity for people who are retirees, pensioners. There is a flat tax opportunity of 7%. And if I'm not mistaken, it's tied to a visa specifically for pensioners. So those people who wanted that opportunity, can benefit from that as well.
Now, when you say pensioners, do you mean that they needed a pension that they're receiving from?
Let me clarify. I'm using the English term. I'm using the British term. Right. Retiree American pensioner is British.
So does it also include Social Security, a pensioner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Social Security, IRA, anything.
Yeah.
Company pensions.
Yeah.
All that.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. So rolling right along. Gentlemen, what do you wish that you had in Athens that you may not have, that you have elsewhere? Let's start with Ken.
Because I go back and forth, if there's anything I really need, I take with me. The one thing that I would love to be able to get in Greece that I can't get in Greece is a soft toothbrush. All of their toothbrushes are mediums. And when most of us in the U.S. use soft. And that is, other than that, there's nothing that I can think of That's such a petty thing, but
That's interesting.
Ken, the next time I go to a big supermarket, I'll see if they have the soft ones and I'll bring it to you.
they don't. I've been.
They don't?
I've been. No.
Oh my God.
I was like, what?
Oh my
How about
gosh.
you, Steve?
How about me? Wow. The overall things that I miss are the three F's, as I call it: family, friends, and food. There is a little bit more creativity, I think, in the United States, especially New York and Philadelphia, the Northeast overall. I do miss the variety of foods that we have, in the States in different restaurants. But that thing's changing here. We're seeing a lot of creativity, and it's kind of cool. But, it's all these little things that every once in a while I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I found this. I really miss this in the States, and I find it in some supermarket. So there are actually quite a few supermarkets that will surprise me and have something that I was like, oh, I didn't realize I missed this. The things that I can't get here are my Burt's Beeswax lip balm. All right. And my favorite deodorant. So everybody who comes to visit me is always going to carry something with them. Yeah. Which is, they're happy to do it for me, and it all works out. So
that's it.
It's silly little things.
Quickly, are there any cons in living there, Ken?
The only con I have is their periodic labor strikes. That is the only thing that's really a nuisance. Today it might be the taxi drivers. Tomorrow it might be the air traffic controllers. It might be even attorneys or the
notaries.
Notaries. The notaries go on strike.
Really?
Yeah. And you're thinking, wow. And notaries are a big deal in Athens. They're as important as attorneys. Because anyway, but
they are attorneys. They are attorneys. They're contract attorneys.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
how about you, Steve? You miss anything?
For me, the one peeve that I have is that
any cons?
In the summer, it can be a little bit too hot for me. And it's not unusual in Fahrenheit to be a little bit over 110 degrees. But on the flip side, 90 degrees in Miami with 100% humidity is much more oppressive than 110 degrees in Athens with 15% humidity.
Can you cool off in Mykonos?
Mykonos is more humid than Athens. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It is. But when we're in a heat spell, the entire country is kind of in the same boat. So even if they're surrounded by water, the humidity is not horrible. And of course, you're in Mykonos or another island and you're just having a great time. So it doesn't matter. You're going to jump in the water. But, people like me who are working, it's July or August and I'm showing houses in the middle of the heat wave. It's exhausting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The nice thing is, though, unlike most of Europe, pretty much everywhere you go, we have air conditioning. So
that's important.
We can, survive through a heat wave. You can go to any store or restaurant. You're going to find air conditioning. The museums, your hotels, they're going to have air conditioning. So whereas if you're in the middle of a heat wave in Germany, which I've experienced, or in Amsterdam, which I experienced, there are no air conditioners. I was in London for a summer. There are no air conditioners.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
Okay. So, gentlemen, tell us where our audience can find you both. We'll start off with Steve. With your business, where can we find you on social media?
On social media, just simply my name, Steve Gantzos, Gantzos. But also I have a Facebook page, which is Greek Property Finders, as you see here, as well as a YouTube channel. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well under my name, Steve Gantzos. What else? Did I miss anything? Want me to provide a phone number for WhatsApp or Viber, or?
We can put that in the show notes.
Perfectly fine.
Okay.
And my website is GreekPropertyFinders.com.
Excellent. Ken?
Okay, Mark. Mine is I'm an author. I failed to mention that earlier. I wrote a book, Greek Life Getaway, Live the Life You've Imagined in Greece, have an accompanying workbook and a digital course. I have a YouTube channel, Greek Life Getaway, and then I have a Facebook group, Greek Life Getaway. I have Greek Life Getaway Facebook page too. So you can find me there.
Wow.
I have LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. And it's Kenneth E. Cook on LinkedIn. And I help people who want to move from the U.S. to Greece to help them cut through the bureaucracy. It's not just a guide, it's to help them integrate into the society. And I work with people like Steve, who I have no interest in real estate whatsoever. So I'll dole them out to the real estate, the insurance. I'm only here to help people live the life they want to live in Greece. So yes, that's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. And in wrapping up, what would you both say to our audience if they're thinking about relocating to Athens? Steve?
I would say don't hesitate, but do come here first. Spend a bit of time. I would say give it about a month. Okay. We have a lot of options for short-term housing, whether it's Airbnb or a few other companies that I can recommend, and live it for a little while. See if it fits for you. I think that's important for anyone.
Okay. And Ken?
I say do it. If you're thinking about it, just do it. Because I've not worked with anybody who's gone to Greece, who wanted to go to Greece, who didn't like it and didn't end up staying or finding a way to make it work for them. It is a very welcoming community. There's anything you want to do, you can find in Athens. As Steve mentioned earlier, on the islands or in some of the remote parts, it might not be as nice as it is in Athens. But you can be on an island in a few hours from Athens. You can be either ferry or plane or whatever, how you want to get there. You can be on the coast in 40 minutes from city center in your bathing suit on the beach, enjoying a wonderful life. Or you could be in the mountains hiking in 30 or 40 minutes. It's just,
or skiing.
Exactly.
Or skiing.
Yep.
Best of both worlds. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining. This was a great educational experience. I'll definitely pass people your way, and we'll put all of your information in the show notes so everyone can look you up. And again, it's been a pleasure in speaking with you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. See you soon, Ken.
My pleasure.
See you soon, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.